Hey guys, got a lot of good feedback on the metabolism piece that I put out there earlier this week, and I wanted to follow up on some of the questions that I was receiving through private message. The two biggest questions I kept receiving was number one, how do I figure out that starting point? You're talking about metabolism and kind of went through your own case study. How do I figure that out for myself? What kind of formula do I use and so forth? Then the other part is more about how to apply this. How do I know what trajectory to put myself on and so forth? And to some degree, there were some questions about where do you even find that information? I know there are a bunch of kind of calculators out there. How can I find this? So let me back up a little bit and talk about exactly some of that research I mentioned, came to be and what that means. You can do one thing as a starting point, which is just to look at general calories. And as I mentioned, you can even just Google that. Go out there and say, how do I know my metabolism or what my calorie intake should be? And it would take you through either some kind of a generic calculator that you would have to trust somebody did correctly, or you could follow a specific formula. And these formulas are pretty simple algebra where, again, they use your age, your weight, height, that kind of thing, gender, and you'll see they have to do some calculations. Multiply this times this, add it to this, and so forth, and then you'll find a general estimation. And they pretty much come back to most of the accepted or agreed upon levels where the average human female metabolism is somewhere between 1,350, 1,450 calories. Average male somewhere between 1,650 and 1,850, somewhere in there. And that's basal metabolic rate. That doesn't include your activity. So I mentioned that even as somebody with a slower metabolism, I know what my baseline would be by any of those calculations, but because of my activity level, my functional metabolic rate is exactly 2,300 calories. And how do I know that? Because I tracked my food as specifically as I could for 6 weeks, tracked my weight daily, my macronutrients daily, and I just did the math. It's like figuring out what your gas mileage is in your car. You're doing those same kinds of calculations. So if you don't want to do all that, where do you start? It would be right there. You just have to track your food and see what those results are and then do some fine tuning. But you truly can start with some kind of a macronutrient, or I should say a calorie calculation, a metabolic calculation. But going a step further, what about the macronutrients? How much protein, how much carbs, how much fat? And these are discussions that we go through all the time with our own Diet Doc program owners. How do I calculate that? I have this person coming to me who might be a 65-year-old type 1 diabetic. This person is a 30-year-old person who's just trying to get in their best shape and so forth. How do I know, where to start? So first of all, you do have to make some of those assumptions on just simple metabolism. How many calories does this person need? Based on our known and accepted ranges that we all talk about through the science agency calculations. And then what about the variables that make them different? How active are they? What is their history? That's a big thing. You guys probably are pretty aware right now, self-aware of your own type of phenotype, your own body type. So, are you an ectomorph, a mesomorph, an endomorph? If you know you can eat a lot of food and so forth, those are things you don't have to look up in a book. They already pertain exactly to your specificity. But how much protein, how much carbs, how much fat? The thing that I wrote about last year when I was discussing all three macronutrients was to look at the exact science agency recommendations, just going down the line. What does every single one of those top organizations say about this? And if we start with protein, we say, okay, that's the most structural macronutrient. That's why I like to start there. It doesn't really need to deviate that much with your goals. If I'm trying to lose weight, gain weight, maintain, my protein is not going to go all over the place per goal change because my body needs a certain amount, and that's where I start. Then those variables can fine tune it just a little bit at a time. So of course the RDA is still zero point 0.8 grams of protein times your body weight in kilograms. And that would give you, for example, somebody my size about 50 or so, 45, 55 grams of protein a day. And that is enough for me to survive. Most health agencies, especially the more aggressive science agencies doing research, show that twice that amount is actually better. It's not just about surviving, but here's where you need to be. Absolutely no safety concerns whatsoever. And that's still a really small amount, right? For me, maybe 100, 120 grams of protein a day. But I mentioned to you that I've maintained 80% of my strength, lean body mass, and so forth, eating about that much. So about twice the RDA. But now my goal is to regain some of the, few pounds of lost lean body mass. So I'm going to try and go up to about 3 times the RDA. And there is some research out there, and again, that's still not a lot. That would be like 180 grams of protein for me. And for a general population person who has never tracked macronutrients, that might seem like a stretch. But for anybody who's been in athletics, physique competition, and so forth, that's not even that much. But some research shows that up to 3 times the RDA is still extremely safe, and there is some value. Now, some studies show there might not be that much value. In other words, the distance between 2 times the RDA and 3 times, are you really going to net more lean body mass or strength or performance? The research right now is pretty mixed, and I think that's for a reason. It's probably going to show that it's negligible. Like right around that space is the range where there's enough of a law of diminishing returns that you can make the choice. It's just really not doing much for me, or at least it's safe and it's okay, so I feel comfortable there. But right in that range is where I would say you should calculate your protein. Then I skip over to fat because I like to use carbs as that variable that really drives my goal. So with fat, if you start with some of the kind of balanced diets that have been out there, they would recommend even an isocaloric diet where 33% of your calories come from fat. Something like Dr. Sears and the Zone Diet said 30%. Most of those, quote, balanced macronutrient plans are right in that 30% range. That's a lot of fat. It really is. If you calculate that out in a normal diet, for me, for example, that would be eating about 80 grams of fat a day. And you got to work pretty hard if you're going to eat 80 grams of fat a day every day. Can be done, but I think somebody trying to lose body fat can get that down to about 20 grams and still have plenty of room for flexibility, even down to, 20%. Or even down to 15% of your calories. That's where it's getting aggressive. And you would find, again, using me as an example, that would put my fat intake down around 30, 35 grams a day. That's easy. I just can't add fat. I'm not going to be eating peanut butter. I'm going to be eating a low-fat cheese instead of regular cheese. You're going to miss some of those condiments and so forth. But again, if that's your goal, you can do that. So I would say, protein over here at 2 to 3 times the RDA, or even the RDA as a basement. That can be your baseline minimum and you're still safe and healthy, and that's fine. Fat, 30% max, 20% kind of average for weight loss goals. Really low could be 15%. Then the balance can be carbohydrates, and that's where you can decide what you want that goal driving percentage to be. So I mentioned in my case study this weekend that after 6 weeks of just static movement, no real body fat gain or loss, I baselined my metabolism perfectly, and I also now know that my intuitive eating has given me 20% of my calories from protein, which came out to 2 times the RDA. I'm going to intentionally move that up a little bit. My fat intake was at about 32%. So I'm going to try and bring that down a little because I want to lose about 5 pounds of body fat. And then the balance can be my carbs. Since I have not been moving, my body weight has stayed the same. I know I've got to make up calories somewhere. So I'm going to be increasing protein and decreasing fat a little bit. Let's say that's a wash. Now I know that I've been averaging about 275 grams of protein a day. I'm going to have to bring that down if I want to lose weight. So that's how you can calculate those things. You can go to some form of calculator, or you can go to an equation online and find out what you think your best guess of your metabolism might be. But because this is all on a bell curve, you could be an outlier on either end and really be surprised. So that's where that data collection will come in. You got to be really consistent and objective with that, and you'll find what's right for you. Then you can kind of play around with those percentages. If you got more questions on the exact macronutrients, I did write 10 articles last year. They're all on our website, thedietdoc.com. I think all of them are also on Huffington Post. But you can look there and you'll find all of those, and we'll keep chatting about it. So thank you guys. Have a great rest of your week.